So today we are on lesson 9 and our second lesson on Gideon. And last week Jim covered the call of Gideon. This week we're going to look at the battle. And then next class we will look at more of the aftermath and what follows after in what I will call the pseudo-judge or the false judge, his son, Abimelech. But for now, we're going to look at sort of the rest of the story of Gideon. And just a few things from last week. Gideon is from the tribe of Manasseh. And there's kind of a question of whether he's from the eastern part of the tribe or the western part of the tribe. And so if you can see from this screen, these are the tribal allotments. And on the right side of the screen, you can see that there's one part of Manasseh that is on the east side of the Jordan, and another part that's on the western side of the Jordan. And there's a little bit of a question of exactly where it is that that Gideon is located. I personally think he may be on the eastern side, but again, I haven't looked at it enough to really sort it out. The problem is a lot of the place names are places we just don't know. Okay? So you see that Manasseh has got these two sort of big regions, and it turns out, as we'll see today, they both play a part in the story. The second thing is this idea of Midianites. Are the Midianites friends of Israel, or are they foes of Israel? Who was Moses' father-in-law? Jethro, at least according to some of the accounts. He has another name in other places. But he's a what? He's a Midianite. So Moses' wife, Zipporah, is a Midianite. Joseph gets sold into slavery in Egypt by... You get two names, either Ishmaelites or Midianites. Okay? Then we see Jael, who is a Midianite, who takes a tent peg to Sisera, thank you. 2 weeks and my mind is gone. And now we see Gideon, and we see what the Midianites are doing. So, and then we have this curious incident of threshing wheat in a wine press. And I thought maybe a good way to explore this or to look at this is a couple of photos that I've taken. This is in the West Bank. It is just outside of Bethlehem, not too far. And what do you see here? You see a lot of rocks. You see kind of a roughly flat, rocky space. Okay? It's limestone, by the way. Now, that's a threshing floor. And if you'll notice from what you see in the background, it's up on a bit of a hill. And this is, who knows how old this threshing floor is, but obviously someone has rebuilt the stone walls behind it. But it's sort of got stone walls around it, and then it is this sort of rough surface that you spread the wheat out on, and then you run a threshing sled, which is basically a big flat piece of wood with, in ancient times it would have been stones embedded on the bottom of it, hard stones on the bottom, attach it to a donkey, and you'd stand on it and run it across the wheat, and it would bust up the husks off of the wheat. And then, because it's on this nice hillside, up kind of out in the open, you would take a basket and you would scoop up the wheat and throw it into the air, and the wind blows all the husks off, and heavy grain falls to the ground.
And into the cracks,
yes, that's right.
Trying to get wheat out of
Yeah, that's exactly right. It is a rough surface. So this is a threshing floor. This is a wine press. Now, wine press does not have to be inside. This one happens to be in an area. But wine pressing is typically something done in lower parts of a valley. It doesn't need to be done on a hillside. You can do it in the shade, so oftentimes they're covered. You're crushing these grapes. You're pressing them out, and then the liquid is carried off, and you jar it up. And so the idea of threshing wheat in a wine press is comical. Okay, it's kind of funny because you really can't effectively thresh wheat in the area where you have a wine press. You don't get enough wind to blow the chaff away. And so it says something about the desperation that the Israelites were in, that they couldn't go up to a hillside where as soon as you start threshing wheat, you're going to kind of get this cloud of chaff blowing out over the valley. It sounds like a smoke signal telling the Midianites where you are, and then they come and take all your wheat. So the idea that you're having to do it in a more secluded area is less efficient and is going to cause its own problems. So we get a little bit of symbology of the challenge based on what Gideon is doing. So the other thing that seems to be kind of fun is that Gideon doesn't seem to have a whole lot of familiarity with the covenant. He's got a lot of doubts about what God's going to do for them. Okay, so that's just a side note to mention, and we'll actually see a shift in this story with Gideon and his doubts that we see in his call. So let's look at the battle. And it says, then Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all the troops that were with him rose early and encamped beside the spring of Harod. And the camp of Midian was north of them, below the hill of Moreh in the valley. The Lord said to Gideon, the troops with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand. Israel would only take credit away from me, saying, my own hand has delivered me. Now therefore proclaim this in the hearing of the troops. Whoever is fearful and trembling, let him return home. Thus Gideon sifted them out. 22,000 returned, and 10,000 remained. So, here is a map that kind of lays out the geographic details that the story gives us. And where are we? Does anyone recognize any of these places from previous lessons? This is the Jezreel Valley. What else happened in the Jezreel Valley? The story of Deborah and Sisera and Yael also takes place in the Jezreel Valley. And as if you recall from an earlier lesson, the Jezreel Valley is basically a massive traffic circle. All the trade flows around the Jezreel Valley because you have these key choke points or passes like at Jezreel and at Megiddo and around Mount Tabor. And all that darker area is lower elevation, so you see the sort of the valleys there and this broad sort of flat area. It's a good place for travel, and the international highways run right through it. And so it's somewhat not surprising that we have another battle in this big economic zone. And you'll see there, Ein Harod. Ein is the Hebrew word for spring. So the spring of Harod is right there. You see the hill of Moreh, just north, and where Ein Harod comes out of the ground is at the base of Mount Gilboa. What other story takes place between the hill of Moreh and Mount Gilboa? Saul's death, yes. So the Philistines are camped on Moreh, the Israelites are camped on Gilboa, and incidentally, where is Saul goes to visit the witch of Endor? Any idea where Endor might be on this map? It's on the north side of the hill of Moreh. So Saul has to walk around all the Philistine troops around their backside to get to the necromancer at the witch at Endor. Okay, so it's kind of it's kind of a crazy way he has to go to find out what he needs. So we have this spring here that's right in this sort of pass that runs down to the Jordan River, and that's the Sea of Galilee sort of at the top there. So this is Ein Harod. This is the spring of Harod. And any idea what Harod means in Hebrew? It means trembling. Well, why is this called the trembling spring? Well, you can't see it in this photo, but if you zoom in on sort of that back corner, the water bubbles up out of the ground pretty significantly, and makes the whole pool tremble. Okay, all the water sort of trembles from the amount of water coming out of this spring. So that's likely how it gets its name. So then he says, then the Lord said to Gideon, the troops are still too many. Take them down to the water, and I will sift them out for you there. When I say, this one shall go with you, he shall go with you. And when I say, this one shall not go with you, he shall not go. So he brought the troops down to the water. And the Lord said to Gideon, all those who lap the water with their tongues, as dogs lap, you shall put on one side. All those who kneel down to drink, putting their hands to their mouths, you shall put to the other side. The number of those that lapped like dogs was 300, but all the rest of the troops knelt down to drink water. Then the Lord said to Gideon, with the 300 that lapped, I will deliver you and give the Midianites into your hand. Let all the others go to their homes. So he took the jars of the troops from their hands and their trumpets, and sent all the rest of Israel back to their own tents, but retained 300. The camp of Midian was below him in the valley. Okay. Why deplete the army? And is there any rhyme or reason to how he does it? Okay. Yeah, so it's very clear that God is the deliverer here, not the Israelites. And therefore, the army needs to be ridiculously small for that to happen. Okay. Good. Is there any rhyme or reason to why he picks the 300?
Well, if you're laughing like a dog, you can still have your sword. Whereas if you're drinking water up to your mouth and both hands, then you're unarmed.
But you're also unaware of what's going on around you. So that anything can happen and you might be overtaken. So you can't say that you are the one who, was watching, seeing, and ready to fight.
Yeah, I've actually heard sort of both arguments, right? That you're having to put your sword down so that you can puck the water to your hands. But at the same time, if you're doing that, you can see what's around you. And grabbing your spear is a quick motion, right? Whereas if you've got your face down in the water,
See the reflection.
you can't see anything, right? You may even probably have your eyes closed to make sure you don't get water in them, right? I mean, bottom line is, I don't know if there's any rhyme or reason to it. It's just that he takes the way that most people don't drink, right?
Maybe they're more likely to go on a suicide mission.
Maybe so. Or maybe it's like, these are the dumb ones, right? Okay, take the ones that are the most illogical, and those are the 300 I'm going to use, right? It's hard to say. It's really tough to say.
Could have been manners.
What's that?
Could have been manners.
I was just going to, the ones who maybe have laughed, they laughed like dogs. God can even use dogs.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to have
Yeah.
the best
Yeah.
Israelites.
That's right. They lapped up water like dogs, and those are the ones he's going to use. Okay. I think, honestly, if I had to pick between the two, I would say he's picking the least likely of the group, right? Which is clear because you've got 9,300 that do it one way, and 300 that do it this weird way. Okay, so it's like, take the weirdos. Those are the ones you're going to fight with.
The most savage.
The most savaged, right? Yeah. Yes, sir.
You might say that the 300 were the most efficient.
More efficient?
Yeah, if they're drinking directly, they're not losing. Whereas if you're trying to drink water with your hands, it's running out. You can't contain it all.
Okay, fair. Now, this is a pretty big spring. In fact, I don't have a picture of the whole area because Israel's turned it into a national park, right? It's all nice cut grass and pristine stones. I mean, it's a perfect teaching spot because you can sit on the stones right near the water, and imagine yourself lapping up the water, putting it to your mouth. But it was certainly not that nice, but it's a lot of water. So even if you're doing this, you're not really it is more efficient, but it's not like you're wasting water in a desert. You're in a pretty green spot, if that makes sense. But yeah, I'm not sure there's a lot of rhyme or reason to it. If I had to pick, I would probably say he's picking the weird ones. He's picking the oddballs. And I think there's a theme in this, because one of the themes you see throughout Scripture is the deliverer is God. God never calls on the people to fight his battle. God says, shut up and sit down and watch what I'm going to do. And that carries all the way through the book of Revelation, right? The church is not the Lord's army, okay? The church is told to shut up and sit down and watch what's going to happen. It's the heavenly army. It's the Lord of hosts, the Lord of the heavenly army. And I think that's something it's easy for us to forget in our current culture today is, as God's people, we're not called to fight. We're called to be the weirdos. We're called to be the ones that sit back and trust in God to do what God's going to do. And Gideon is a prime example of that. And he's not the only one. It's time and time again. You see it throughout the Scriptures. God says, shut up, sit down, and watch what I'm going to do. And you're not going to believe it.
Wasn't Gideon just hiding and doing the job that he was doing, that he didn't want to be called, so he...
Yeah, that call of Gideon is like, okay, really? You know, first of all, I don't see God do anything for us, right? So he kind of challenges God to say, great, you know, you say God is with us, but I'm not seeing it. Okay, and then he tests God with the fleece and, you know, things like that. But even at this point, we're going to see, he's still a bit uncertain. Right? Yes, sir.
It's interesting to me how he does it differently for different battles.
Yes.
Some battles he uses the whole army, yet he is with them and they conquer. Then another time when the angel of the Lord went into the camp by himself and depleted their army, and they didn't have to do anything at all. It's like he's using every situation, doing it every which way to say, I'm in charge. I can do it any way I want to.
Yeah, but even when he has the whole army, it tends to be, like we saw with Deborah, that he causes the rain that causes the chariots to get stuck in the mud, right? And so you've got an enemy that's superior with chariots against Israelites with probably bronze weapons, right? You've got nuclear weapons versus Kalashnikovs, right? I mean, you've got this great disparity of weapons, and yet they still overcome, right? There's always this idea that the people of God are underdogs, right? But you're right, he does it in various different ways. Not every battle's the same play over and over again. Yeah. Okay. So then it says, and so this is again, why is this? Because he says, I will deliver you, right? That's what he says earlier in verses, that's probably verse 7, that, you know, there are too many people because I will deliver you. You're not going to take credit for yourself. Okay. And it says, that same night, the Lord said to him, that's Gideon, get up and attack the camp, for I have given it into your hand. But if you fear to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Purah, and you shall hear what they say. And afterward your hand shall be strengthened to attack the camp. Then he went down with his servant Purah to the outposts of the armed men that were in the camp. The Midianites and the Amalekites and all the people of the east lay along the valley as thick as locusts, and their camels were without number, countless as the sand on the seashore. And when Gideon arrived, there was a man telling a dream to his comrade. And he said, I had a dream. And in it a cake of barley bread tumbled into the camp of Gideon and came to rest and came to the tent and struck it so that it fell. It turned upside down and the tent collapsed. And his comrade answered, this is no other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash, a man of Israel. Into his hand God has given Midian and all the army. Okay. Now, first of all, Purah it's his servant. The term in Hebrew is na'ar, which has a wide range of meanings. It can mean a young man of marriageable age. It can also mean an aide de camp. It can mean a servant. It can also mean like his, it's his gopher, right? His aide de camp that goes with him and makes sure that his orders get carried out. But what I want to focus on is this really weird dream. And what in the world is going on with this cake of barley bread? And I don't like that translation. But I like to imagine it's a giant pita. Okay? A big pita rolled into the camp. Okay? If this were in Texas, it'd be this massive tortilla came rolling into town, into the, and knocked the tent over. And so what is it about this bread that causes this guy to interpret this dream like this? What's going on here? It seems really weird, and the interpretation seems kind of made up.
You think they were hungry?
Okay, maybe they were hungry. Well, they've been eating all the food, so I can't imagine, right? So here's kind of a fun little fact, and I just throw this because it's one of these things that just doesn't work in English. But we have this fun word play. Now, you don't need to know Hebrew to look at these two words. They are, you read them from right to left, okay? And it is typical of Hebrew. It is 3 letters. The first one is a lamed, which is an L. The second one is a het, which has a sound, which most of us have trouble making. And the third letter is an M, or a mem, okay? And if you look at those two, do you see any difference? They're exactly the same. But I'm telling you, they are 2 different words. And so Hebrew, modern Hebrew and even ancient Hebrew, was written as just the consonants. Okay? But you can put a lot of vowels on those consonants. And so in about 1000 AD, a group of Jews called the Masoretes decided that they needed to make sure that the way to pronounce these words was properly encoded in the text. And so what they did is they made up a whole series of little symbols for vowels. We call them vowel pointings. And if you look at the vowel pointings of these 2 words, without even knowing how they're pronounced, you can see that those little symbols underneath those letters are different. Okay, so the one on the right is pronounced lacham, and the one on the left is pronounced lechem. And interestingly, lechem is the word for bread or food, and lacham is the word for fight or to fight.
Worse than English.
Mm-hmm.
That's worse than English.
It's worse than English. So I came up with an example, and the prophets love doing this. Okay, so for example, and I meant to bring it, I forgot, I was in a rush this morning. If I had a can of Coke, and I asked you, what is this thing? And you said, what do you see? It's a can. And then I said, behold, the Lord can fight for you. Okay? I've got a noun, can, and a verb, can, or able to. Okay? It's the same spelling. If you put them side by side, you couldn't tell the difference. How do you tell? Context. How's it being used? Okay? The prophets do that. They make corny word plays like that. And this dream is based on a word play. Okay? So the bread, the lechem, going through the camp, okay, turning up the tent, in their minds, oh, lechem, that kind of sounds like fighting. Right? So that's the word play that's going on in this weird dream. And so then Gideon heard the telling of the dream and its interpretation. He worshipped, and he returned to the camp of Israel and said, get up, for the Lord has given the army of Midian into your hand. After he divided the 300 men into 3 companies and put trumpets into the hands of all of them and empty jars with torches inside the jars, he said to them, look at me and do the same. When I come to the outskirts of the camp, Do as I do. When I blow the trumpet, I and all who are with me, then you shall also blow the trumpets around the whole camp and shout for the Lord and for Gideon. Now, do you notice any change in Gideon?
He became a man of valor.
Okay. What was he before? A wimp? Okay.
Very reluctant.
He's very reluctant, very doubtful. Even God says to him, if you're uncertain about this, go down and listen to the camp. Okay? And all of a sudden, he hears this, and now he comes back and he's on fire. Now, I want you to think about this. God has taken a fleece and had him set it inside where it was dry and it became wet. Then he said, okay, or I mean, get in the reverse. Then he said, put it outside and it was dry. All the ground around it was wet. Okay? God's told him to go down to the camp. He's told him all these things he's going to do. What is the thing that finally convinces Gideon that God is on his side?
He sees in them what he was feeling. He was seeing that they're not as confident
Okay.
or able to overcome the army as he once saw them.
Okay.
He saw a weakness.
Randy, and then
He believed the dream, not just the dream of an enemy, but the enemy's interpretation of that dream.
yeah. Ken?
Along that same line, he didn't believe God when God told him something. They believed a person that didn't know anything about it.
He believes a Midianite prophetic dream. It's not so much that he's believed God, he's believed a Midianite oracle. And that's kind of shocking. But that's finally what lights the fire under him to get him going. And then it says, so Gideon and 100 who were with him came to the outskirts of the camp at the beginning of the middle of the watch. When they had just set the watch, and they blew the trumpets and smashed the jars that were in their hands. So the 3 companies blew the trumpets and broke the jars, holding in their left hands the torches and in their right hands the trumpets to blow. And they cried, a sword for Gideon, or sword for the Lord and for Gideon. Every man stood in his place all around the camp. All the men in the camp ran. They cried out and fled. When they blew the 100 trumpets, the Lord set every man's sword against his fellow and against all the army. And the army fled as far as Beit Shittah, towards Zererah, as far as the border of Abel-Mecholah by Tabath. What are they not carrying? Swords. They got, what's in their left hand?
Torch. Or trumpet.
I have to look and see. They got the torches in their left hand, and in their right hands they've got the trumpets.
No shields.
In their other hand they're carrying what? This isn't Reaganomics, right? I mean, they've got 2 hands, right? So where is the other? They got no swords.
No swords and no shields.
And no shields in their hands.
The Lord is the sword and the shield.
And it's interesting that they're calling out a sword for the Lord and for Gideon, and that's what now, do they have them in a sheath? They probably do, but they're not in their hands. Okay? Fascinating little detail about how this battle takes place. So, who is it that's basically defeating the army? It's God, and it's the Midianites killing themselves in the confusion of the darkness, surrounded by trumpets and torches. So then, says all the men of Israel were called out from Naphtali and from Asher and from all Manasseh, and they pursued after the Midianites. Then Gideon sent messengers throughout all the hill country of Ephraim, saying, come down against the Midianites and seize the waters against them, as far as Beth Barah and also the Jordan. So all the men of Ephraim were called out, and they seized the waters as far as Beit Barah and also the Jordan. And they captured the 2 captains of Midian, Oreb and Zeev. And they killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb, and they killed Zeev. And Zeev they killed at the winepress of Zeev. As they pursued the Midianites, they brought the heads of Oreb and Zeev to Gideon beyond the Jordan. So just kind of back to our map. Who gets involved in this battle? We have Asher. We have Naphtali. Okay, we have Manasseh. And then they call the Ephraimites. Now I want you to think about the fact that he's got to send out messengers. It's easy to read the text and think that this battle takes about 15 minutes, right? But it's quick. But the fact that he's got to call messengers to go from the Jezreel Valley through Manasseh. I don't know if you can see where the Jezreel Valley is on here, but it's right, let's see, right in this area here. Okay, right in this border between Issachar and Manasseh. It's where the Jezreel Valley is. And so he's got to send runners to Ephraim, and they've got to muster and get all the people together, and then head down to cut them off. This is not a small operation. This is going to take some time. Okay, they're not killed the same day. This is going to take a little more time than the text compresses it into. And then it says, then Gideon came to the Jordan and crossed over, he and 300 who were with him, exhausted and famished. So he said to the people of Sukkot, please give me some loaves of bread to my followers, for they are exhausted, and I am pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian. But the officials of Sukkot said, do you already have in your possession the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna, that we should give bread to your army? And Gideon replied, well then, when the Lord has given Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, I will trample your flesh on the thorns of the wilderness and on briars. From there he went up to Penuel and made the same request of them. And the people of Penuel answered as the people of Sukkot, as they had answered. So he said to the people of Penuel, when I come back victorious, I will break down this tower. Now, here is kind of how the battle unfolds. All right, so we have, let's see, we have Ein Harod is kind of where the battle starts. The blue is the forces of Gideon and his people. The white is the fleeing Midianites, and the red is their pursuit after them. The light blue is the Ephraimites and their path according to the text. But you notice where Sukkot and Penuel are. They're on the east side of the Jordan. And so my question is, why is it that Sukkot and Penuel refuse to help Gideon? Ah, okay. They don't know what's happened. Okay. What else might there be?
The Midianites, this is starting to be the Midianites' territory.
Ah.
Why do you help when the Israelites say the Midianites are going to come back and punish them?
Okay. They're on the front lines of where the Midianites come from. They're the ones that are most vulnerable to retaliation. And they don't know Gideon from a hole in the ground and whether, what he's done. And so they recognize that if Gideon fails and they give him food, they're next. And what I find a little bit ironic is that they're hesitant and reluctant, kind of like Gideon was at the very beginning of the story. Gideon's not willing to get involved. He's not real confident about what God is doing. And so these people of Sukkot and Penuel are expressing the same sort of frustration. So I think it's easy for us to read this story and say, oh, well, those are just, more evil Israelites that are siding with the enemy. But in reality, they're no different than Gideon was. before he heard the Midianite dream. And so in a way, their response is pretty understandable. I'm not defending it that what they did is right, but saying you can kind of understand why they might think that, right? Because they're the ones on the front lines if the Midianites turn back around and come at them again. And they were probably the first ones to get overrun by the Midianites when they moved through in the beginning. Yes, sir?
One of the things I noticed that I hadn't really picked up on before, it wasn't just the Midianites, but it said the Midianites, the Amalekites, and all the other eastern peoples.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can understand their reluctance. We don't know, what does all of the eastern peoples mean?
Yeah. There's a lot in this story that's hyperbole about, all these people and what they're up against. But at the same time, it's basically saying all these people that are in the east, okay, the Amalekites, these are the desert people, okay? These are the shepherds. They're the ones with flocks. They're the Bedouins, right? If you want to think of a modern sort of term for it. That are coming up with their camels and everything else, and they are just tearing the land apart. And they're also coming up at the wrong time of year, too, right? They're coming up when the grain is ripe and destroying the crops. They would normally come when the crops have been harvested, and at that point, their flocks are welcome in the fields because they're dropping their droppings and eating all the little stubble and fertilizing the land, but they're coming at the wrong times. Yes, sir?
I forgot, there was one other thing I was going to ask you about, and that is in relation to that. And it says that the Midianites were destroying the crops, right?
Yeah.
But it also says something about, and the sheep, the cattle, and donkeys. And so it sounds like they killed all the livestock. Is that correct?
Well, the way I read it is that they were bringing, I have to go back and look at it again, but for some reason, when I read it, I thought it was saying they came up with all their sheep, their cattle, and their donkeys. It may be they were killing all the sheep and cattle and donkeys of the Israelites too. Very well could be.
Yeah.
Very well could be. Or at a minimum, taking them, right? Because that's working capital, basically. Yeah. Good point. Okay. So then we get into the epilogue, and I've skipped a little bit of the story just because it's beyond what I want to cover. Then the Israelites said to Gideon, "Rule over us, you and your son and your grandson, also, for you have delivered us out of the hand of Midian." Gideon said to them, "I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you." Then Gideon said to them, "Let me make a request of each of you. Give me an earring he has taken as booty." For the enemy had gold earrings because they were Ishmaelites. "We will willingly give them," they answered. So they spread a garment, and each threw into it an earring he had taken as booty. The weight of the gold earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, apart from the crescents and the pendants and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian and all the collars that were on the necks of their camels. Okay, the first thing I want to point out is taking all of these gold earrings, and we'll see next week what he does with all of it. Is it reminiscent of anything? Yes. Moses and the golden calf, taking the jewelry and melting it down and turning it into something. Okay, we'll see that something next week. But what I want to point out and look at is this question about this let you rule over us, you, your son, and your grandson. And are the people wrong in asking for a king? And is Gideon correct in refusing their request?
Kings were what they were used to. Everybody was kind of divided up in tribes and kings and whatever. So they were used to having their leaders were all kings.
Okay.
It's interesting because I was remembering that the Israelites started asking for a king in the days of Samuel. This is quite a bit earlier, so That's been an ongoing thing in Israel
Okay.
for a while now.
And is it a good thing or a bad thing, what they're asking for?
Well, right now they're separate tribes, and by being tiny tribes, these other people who come in and attack and go and plunder them, they have a king that unites them, and they're a larger country than all else.
Okay, okay. Okay, so if you had to vote, just a quick show of hands, is it wrong for them to ask for a king? Okay? Seems like most people say wrong. Okay. Well, then we get this. This is Deuteronomy. When you have come into the land that the Lord your God has given you and have taken possession of it and settled in it, and you say, I will set a king over me like all the nations that are around me, you may indeed set a king over you, whom the Lord your God will choose. One of your own community you may set as king over you. You are not permitted to put a foreigner over you who is not of your own community. So is a king a good thing or a bad thing?
It depends on who the king is.
Okay, it depends on who the king is. Now, one commentator actually said, maybe the right thing for Gideon to do at this point was to go inquire of the Lord whether or not he should be king. Since it says, whom the Lord your God will choose. Okay? But he refuses. He says, absolutely not. Okay? We're going to pick that up more next week when we look more at what happens in the aftermath. But what I want to say, for at least for now, is that what we see throughout the Old Testament, throughout the entire Bible, Yahweh fights Israel's battles, not the Israelites. And that goes all the way through the book to Revelation. Gideon is changed by a pre-battle Midianite dream, more than he is changed by anything God tells him to do. And when the people of Sukkot and Penuel refuse to aid Gideon, they do it because they're vulnerable. And it's just like Gideon was at the start of the narrative. But how we evaluate Gideon, is he a good judge or a bad judge? Is he right in his actions or wrong in his actions? Is something we're going to take up next week. And so for next week, we're going to look at Gideon's legacy and his son, one of his sons. So read Judges 8:22 through the end of chapter 9. And also read that Deuteronomy 17, but go through verse 20, 14 through 20. And compare that against what we see about Gideon. And then, how does the narrator view Gideon? Is he a good ruler or a bad one? And also consider, what is his son's name? And what does his name say about Gideon? Okay, and we'll look at all that next week. Thank you all very much. And, well, that's a good question. Next week is Easter. I need to confirm whether there are no classes. So this will be in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, we will pick this back up.